Hello, friends and fellow Bible students. We're doing a little nighttime video today, and I was going to do a video today on the topic, the Day of the Lord. And while I was researching that, I came across some information about a different phrase from chapter 1, the Lord's Day. And the information was excellent, is very thorough. It was written by someone who is familiar with the Greek language, and the original language in the New Testament was Greek, and especially in Revelation. And so it talks about several possibilities that scholars have come up with what the Lord's Day really means. And so I'm going to go over that. It's a 24-page document, and I'll provide you a link to it down at the bottom or in the description of this video. But I've tried to go through and pick out the most important things for each point, and this may be a little dry because I don't have all of this information memorized, so I will be reading from here a little bit. But I want you to see that there's been a lot of research into this and that there's some good information. So we're talking about the phrase in Revelations chapter 1, verse 10, where John says he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day. Actually, let me see what my Bible says. Mine is the Complete Jewish Bible. And actually, I came to be in the Spirit. Mine says on the day of the Lord, but almost all other translations say on the Lord's day. And I heard behind me a loud voice like a trumpet saying, "Write down what you see." So that's the passage we're talking about. So, most people believe that the translation on the Lord's Day is the proper translation. And there are two problems with that phrase, on the Lord's Day. And the first one is that this exact phrase in Greek occurs nowhere else in the New Testament, nowhere else in the original manuscripts, and nowhere in early Christian writings that coincide with the writings of Revelation. The second problem is that the context, all the information around this, does not give any indication or even a hint about which day of the week this text is referring to. So we're going to proceed from there. There are two major approaches used to interpret this expression in the original language. Most commentators believe it refers to a literal weekday. The second alternative, or there are several other alternatives. A literal weekday, some believe that possibly could mean Easter Sunday. Some believe it could mean Emperor's Day. Some believe it could mean the seventh-day Sabbath. In the second approach to this, that was all the first approach, where they're saying it is a literal day. The second approach is that it is referring to a prophetic day, the day of the Lord. And so the purpose of this whole article is to review all of those possibilities. So first we're going to look at the possibility that it could mean Sunday. And that is the most common view among ancient and modern commentators, that it refers to the first day of the week, Sunday. The main support for this view comes from second-century Christian writers who used the reference to Sunday because they say that Jesus was resurrected on Sunday. There's no question that later in history, Sunday became known as the Lord's Day. it was adopted and picked up later in history. However, all of the references to Sunday as the Lord's Day were used at least 1 century after Revelation was written. There is no indication that the word Sunday was ever used during the New Testament church, and for decades and decades and decades after Revelation was written, there are no records, no indication that this was ever used as Sunday, that this expression meant Sunday. So why in the world would John put Sunday, the Lord's Day? There are 2 early 2nd century Christian writings that some believe might be a strong evidence for this, but upon a closer look, the answer is no, they could not possibly be. It should be noted here that the text that reads this phrase that is interpreted as that, the word day does not appear in that phrase according to the Lord's Day. And it says that many translators do render it according to the Lord's, but they say it could mean teaching, command, or way. But the actual phrase means according to the Lord's. And that is the way it is translated most of the time, according to the Lord's. But then the translators added the word day. It is not there. Okay, moving on. However, the Greek text does not read according to the Lord's without the word day. In this case, the word day is supplied by the translators, making it read on the Lord's Day. Latin translations sometimes have made it say according to the Lord's life. But the original Greek text does not support this either. So it's not day, it's not life. It is commonly translated with just the pure Greek according to the Lord's. The word day or anything like that does not come after that. So this would make someone conclude that there is no conclusive evidence showing that this phrase was used for the first day of the week by Christians in the early 2nd century, or that would lead us to the conclusion that John the Revelator initiated the phrase to mean Sunday. He did not do that. There is no evidence that that is what he meant or that is what he said. And this is also true in the early works by Barnabas and Justin Martyr. They do not use the Lord's Day with reference to Sunday. They used other things like the first day of the week, things like that. Never was it used the Lord's Day. So all of the evidence for this is inconclusive. According to the original language, this could not have been on the Lord's Day. To make it say that, the translators had to add it in, and it was done based on tradition. They wanted it to say on the Lord's Day. And a lot of the reason for that was because they were trying to lend support for Sunday as the Sabbath and not Saturday. But that's another topic. Another possible explanation that they had was that it could mean Easter, that it refers to the Passover or Easter Sunday rather than the weekly just the weekly Sunday. But the Easter Sunday view has been contested and refuted on the basis of many different arguments. That there is no conclusive evidence that Easter was ever called this phrase. And so that is a bust as well. And for one last argument against that is that John the Revelator, in his area and in his time, the Passover was celebrated on the 14th of Nisan of the Jewish lunar calendar, the day of Passover. So there's never any question that John would have used the word Sunday or Easter. The next possibility that people think is they think that it could be Emperor's Day. And I did actually have someone send me a comment about this, that they had heard that it was a holiday where they would pay tribute to Caesar. And it was a common holiday called Emperor's Day. And so some scholars suggest that at least in Asia Minor, the first day of each month or a certain day of each week was Emperor's Day. But it is difficult on the basis of linguistics to see a connection between the expression the Lord's Day and the expression Augustus Day, which was the Emperor's Day. The two phrases are completely different. There is no conclusive evidence that's been discovered saying that the Lord's Day was ever used in reaction to the day honoring the emperor. And most assuredly, since the emperor was killing Christians, it would be hard to understand why John would use the phrase that meant the emperor's day. The next possibility is the Sabbath, the seventh day of rest, Sabbath. It means the Sabbath day. The phrase, the Lord's Day, is not used in the original manuscripts or anywhere else in the New Testament. But the day is reported in the fourth commandment of the Ten Commandments. There are many phrases in the Bible that refers to your Sabbath. So people thought they could get the Lord's Day from there, your Sabbath. There's also many phrases, at least 16 times, where the phrase my Sabbath is in the Bible. They say it is possible that Christians in Asia would have easily understood this phrase as possibly meaning on the Sabbath. And most Christians were most likely keeping the Sabbath, the seventh-day Sabbath, during that time, according to historical records. But again, it is just a possibility that is not the strongest possibility. The last approach, or the last possibility of what it could mean, is the day of the Lord. This interpretation says that the phrase does not refer to a literal day, but to the prophetic day of the Lord. Because John was taken away in a vision to witness the events leading toward the prophetic day of the Lord, which was unfolded before him in vision. And this was considered a time when God would intervene powerfully in end-time world affairs. The phrase, the day of the Lord, is used uniformly many, many times throughout the original manuscripts of the Old Testament, as well as in the New Testament. The conclusion is that in Revelations 1 and 10, the grammar and the context favor the interpretation the day of the Lord as the day of judgment referred to in the original manuscripts. And if we look at the text, it does not state that John was on Patmos on the Lord's day when he received his vision, but states that while he was on Patmos, he came to be in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And looking at the usage of this expression, John is consistent all through the book, and all of the other occurrences of in the Spirit refer to a symbolic rather than a literal time or place. So everywhere else that it says in the Spirit, it is talking about prophetic events and not a Sunday or a Saturday or an Easter or an Emperor's Day. So being consistent with the context, it would make sense that this also was a prophetic phrase. Why would John use the adjective, the Lord's day, if that's the way it is interpreted, rather than the noun, the day of the Lord? Does it bring about a change in meaning? And no, it should not. For instance, the Lord's Supper in 1 Corinthians 11 is the same thing as the table of the Lord in 1 Corinthians 10. The basic difference in these two phrases is simply a matter of emphasis. When the emphasis is placed on the word Lord, the emphasis can also be placed on the word day, and the adjective noun is used. Does that make sense? In other words, they're saying that the Lord's day and the day of the Lord don't have to necessarily mean two different things. It just means that the emphasis is being placed on something different, on the Lord and not the day. And if it's translated the other way around, the emphasis is being placed on the day of the Lord. And it's possible that he did it this way for emphasis, wanting to inform the reader that he was transported in vision into the context of the day of the Lord and the events leading up to it. The prophetic day of the Lord is clearly supported by the context, because the prophecy of this day is clearly the framework for every vision in Revelations. So the day of the Lord is the purpose of the book of Revelation. And I'm going to read one more thing. This is a phrase by one of the scholars, Charles H. Welch. This is a quote. The book of Revelation is taken up with something infinitely vaster than days of the week. It is solely concerned with the day of the Lord. To read that John became in spirit on the Lord's day, on Sunday, tells practically nothing. To read in the introduction that John became in spirit in the day of the Lord, the day of prophetic importance, tells us practically everything. So it is my conclusion, based on this evidence, that it is referring to the day of the Lord and not a day of the week or a holiday. And that is actually what my Bible, the Complete Jewish Bible, has translated it as. And this Bible is edited and translated by a distinguished Jewish believer in the Messiah, a professor and a historian and an expert in the Hebrew language. And that is also his interpretation of the Greek and of the Hebrew through the Old Testament. And so I believe that Revelations 1:10 says that John was in the Spirit on the day of the Lord. So he was seeing the day of the Lord while he was in the Spirit and everything leading up to it. So I hope I didn't confuse you. And if you want to read the whole document, there is a link in the description box in the YouTube video. So thank you. Have a good evening.